for coming. I am going to flip a switch and roll back time 130 years. So I'm going to talk to you as if I were my own great-grandmother, Sarah Agnes Prine. So, oh my goodness, it is a beautiful, beautiful day out here and so cool and fall-like. I rode here in one of those consarn horseless carriages, and you've got to have all this net over you or you just eat flies and gnats the whole way. So I can take that off now. Now, a lady would not remove her hat outdoors, nor would she let her wrist bones show or her ankles. You know, there's some fellas in town that sit near stairways to watch ladies go up and down to see if they can spy their ankles. It's just horrible living in town. I tried it for a while. I'd much rather be out here on the range. So I started writing stories when I was 16 years old. But when I was 17, my pa came home one day and said the Navajo Indians was on the warpath. At that time, we lived at Cottonwood Springs, Arizona, which is up by what they call Four Corners now. The thing was, my pa didn't realize Abraham Lincoln had cut that state in half. He thought we lived in New Mexico territory. So that's what he always told it. But he said, round up the herd, we're going east to Texas for greener pastures. So we knew all about the Navajo tribes and the trouble that the Army was giving them. Think about that for a minute. It wasn't the Indians bothering us. But we didn't know there was Comanches on the way to Texas. We didn't know anything about that. And we started east towards Texas in July of 1881. That is a long, hot trip. And we followed the SPR railroad tracks after we drove a herd clear down from Four Corners and Cottonwood Springs through Hayden's Ferry. Now there's a big old town there called Phoenix. But at the time, Hayden's Ferry is now turned into Tempe. And we came clear down into the San Pedro River Valley where we hit the railroad tracks. Now, a lot of people want to know, why did you follow railroad tracks? Didn't you have a map? Didn't you know where you were going? Well, trains need water. You know that. They have to fill up and hook up those boilers with lots of wood and coal and whatever else they'll burn to burn steam to push that train down the tracks. And horses need water. So if we follow the tracks, we had water the whole way there. Well, we got to Texas, but we fought Indians the whole way. And once we hit San Angelo, we had nothing left but the smiles on our faces and the calluses on our hands. And my little brother said, I don't see what you got to smile about. I just don't understand. I'm so tired and beat and scared and worn. I just want to go home. By that time, our pa had taken a bullet in the arm, and he got real sick, and we didn't understand. There weren't any doctors around. We patched him up, and it looked okay, but he just got more and more fevered, and then pretty soon, one day, he died. We didn't know what to do. Mama was so distraught, she just hid her head in her hands and wept for days and days. Well, I found out there was a cavalry unit preparing to take folks west on a wagon train back to Arizona territory where we was from. And I went and talked to some people, and there he was, a Captain Jack Elliott, and he said there was room for a couple more wagons if we wanted to go. So I got my brother Albert, and we put together all our spending cash that was left, bought us an old beat-up wagon, and we took off with him. And on the way, we even picked up some seedlings of trees that we thought we'd plant when we got back up to home at Four Corners. Maybe we'd even stop in Prescott. It was getting to be a pretty good-sized town. And there was doctors and stores and things. You could actually buy a stove. You didn't have to cook over a campfire. So we took off, and we come back. And you know, there was Indians all the rest of the way. And we tried and tried to just talk to them or be nice to them, but we were cutting through their land, and I understand what that's like. Ranchers and people don't want people crossing their land. So here we came back to Arizona territory. But you know, the one thing I wanted the most in my life was to learn to read and write. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be a lady. I got these duds on today because I kind of learned how to be a lady, but you know, that was 130 years ago, and I never went to school. I wanted to real bad, but one day along the trail, I found a deserted wagon, and in it was the dearest treasure I thought I had ever seen. Boxes and boxes of books. Books with golden edges and swirly colors on the sides and pictures inside and all kinds of words. And one was a dictionary, a book full of words to spell and what they mean. I just thought it was a treasure for sure. But by then, we didn't have enough horses to pull an extra wagon. And my little old roan Rose, she was just small. She wasn't a draft horse to pull a wagon. So I went to Captain Elliott again and I said, I want the loan of some Army horses. And he said, well, I can't sell those to a civilian. And I said, but I found a wagon of books. I want to bring it. Somebody else threw it away. He said, it's no good. Oh, it's good. I said, this is a treasure chest. But I didn't tell him that out loud. I thought he'd think I was touched. Well, you know, I was only 17 by then. I had just gotten my first long skirt, my first pair of real ladies' boots. And believe me, they're kind of pinchy. I wish I had gone back and worn my brother's old saddle boots. They were easier. So, ended up, Captain Elliott said, I can't sell Army horses. I'm about to lose my hat. But he said I could trade them for something of equal value. He climbs up inside that wagon and he starts picking up books and says, looky here, it's the animals of Africa. It's all about monstrous creatures. And I said, what is that about? And he said, this one's for one horse. And he picked up another book and he said, the sermons of Right Reverend Simon Thomas Brown. And he looked at my face, not at the book. And I said, that one will do. And he said, no, that ain't worth a horse. And he picked up that dictionary book with a big D. It was all full of words to learn and how to spell and what they meant. And he looked at my face and I said, you don't want that book. That's no good. That's no good at all. He said, well, this might be worth a horse. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's half a horse. And I said, you got to find a one-horse book. And so then he found a book that was a story. The Duchess of Warwick and Her Sorrow by the Sea. And inside was a picture of a lady waiting on a shore and a big ship sailing away. And I just had to know what was in that book and what the story was about and who was sailing away and if there was Comanches on the horizon and what was her life going to be. And he looked at me again and he said, there's another horse. Let's go get your horses, Miss Prine. I was so sad. But you know that rascal, he took those books and he gave me horses and I got to Arizona territory. Now you picture coming out here to this valley where Mr. Vail ran this beginning of this first ranch, 1880s. It was July still when we got back, and then it was August when we found a place to homestead. You've come out here in August and picture yourself drawing a little square on the ground and saying, let's build a house here. Let's dig a well. It was hot. It was really hot. And we didn't have hardly any horses left, and we didn't have any cattle. But we settled here, and we planted our trees up near Cienega Creek, farther north from here. But if you, now I've lost my sound. Did I bop something?
Pitch.
I'll talk louder water till he gets that organized. If you can imagine, this grassland and mesquite trees went all the way up to the town of Tucson. It used to be called San Augustine. We'll have a little technology check here. But up in those days, you know, you could run several hundred cows on an acre. Now, after the drought we had from 1900 to 1906, you can't hardly run 2 or 3 cows up near Tucson. It's all cactus because we had a lot of things we didn't know yet. Things people needed to learn. Some strange men touching my person. Will that other one work here?
Yeah.
We'll try that. At any rate, along that first wagon trip, I began to write the story. You got sound?
Should have sound.
Got nothing? Okay, I began to write with a quill pen and some hoof blacking that my pa gave me. You know, you light a little candle, melt it a little bit, you can use it like ink. So I started to write, and I wrote that story, and I kept track of everything that happened to us, especially after Jack Elliott took me for a little walk one day. And then he declared I was a brave girl, and he thought favorably of me. And I sort of thought poorly of him. I knew what soldiers were like, and I didn't want anything to do with any of them, and my mom wouldn't allow him to eat supper with us, even on the trail. But we got to Arizona Territory, and the soldiers took off to the fort at Fort Huachuca, and some of them went to Fort Grant. And we were left out in the desert. But you know, ever so often, just like a tumbleweed, here come that Jack Elliott. And he'd bring stuff, and he'd say howdy, and my mom would say, get out there and fix him some pie. And I'd think, why do I have to go take pie to some old ornery soldier? And then my sister-in-law, Savannah, would say, get in there and comb your hair. I don't care about combing my hair, I'll put on a bonnet. Well, he just kept coming around, and then, you know, we had more Indian troubles, and we had some real good neighbors by the name of Maldonado, and they stood with us against when the Yaquis and the other Apaches came and tried to chase us off our land. Now, we did not know at the time the Apaches that were in the bunch consisted of a chief named Geronimo and another fellow named Ulzana. They were pretty big people in their tribe at the time, but they were ferocious warriors, and they were scary, and it wasn't easy. So we lost people, and we lost herds. But you know, that Jack Elliott kept coming back. And pretty soon I thought, you know, if that character's going to stand around here and just look silly all day, he can darn well give me back my books. He's got my books and I want them. And he just looked at me and said, those books are no longer for sale. So here comes a fella that I knew from beforehand, long time ago, named Jimmy Reed. And he was handy. And he said I was handy, and let's get hitched. So I did. First thing you know, I had a little girl. And that wasn't easy because there was nobody home but me. But I took care of business because I knew how to do it. I'd helped my ma, I'd helped my sister-in-law, and I'd birthed a whole lot of cattle and horse babies, so I just took care of it. And then Jimmy up and got killed by his favorite horse. And I just thought my life was going to be over. There was nothing I could do but feed horses, and I couldn't take care of it all with a brand new baby. And then I thought, if there's anything I could do, it's to write to that Jack Elliott, get my books back. You know, in those days, a lady did not ever write to a man. Never. You could not correspond. You could not even entertain to speak to him unless he addressed you first in public. Well, the thing was, unless it was business. And Arizona not being a state, because we were just too consarn ornery to be let in the union, we were under a different kind of rule that came from old Mexico, and women could run businesses. Women could be bosses of ranches. Women could sell stuff and buy stuff without having to cater to what any man wanted. We could do our own business. So, despite the laws back east of propriety, I wrote to Jack Elliott and said, "You better bring me back my books." Well, one day he showed up. And you know, I kept on writing those stories, and I kept on writing those stories. And then one day, some feller off in New York City said, "Your grandma sent me a copy of your diary. I'm going to sell it." And I said, "Well, to who?" And he said, no, listen, we'll print some copies. And I'm going to send it to England." I said, "Where is that? Is that like in Kansas or something?" And he said, no, it's over the ocean. So that feller sold that book, and he said, "Write some more." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything. I'm just, putting down what happens on the ranch." Well, pretty soon he sold another one, and they called it Sarah's Quilt. Now, I had a title for that because it come a drought that like to killed everybody and everything we knew. The Palo Verdes was falling over. All those prickly pear cactus, they looked like little skinny dried up tortillas just laying in piles on the ground. There was no water for cows, and they were dying in the fields. There was no water for horses, and then our well went dry. Well, I was writing all that down, and by then, Jack and I had had some children of our own, besides the one I had with Jimmy. And my two boys were pretty big enough to be a whole lot of trouble. I sent them off. In those days, there wasn't any high school in Tucson. There was just the primary school, and then you went to the university. So most of the people who went to the university were about 13 or 14 years old. And I sent my two fellas off there to study geology because I wanted them to do some gold mining. Well, they came home, and I just thought, I'm going to take this rug beater to their behinds. And as I was putting all this down, here comes a boy up the road named Willie Prine, wearing nothing but rags and bare feet, and over his shoulder he had slung a stick with the most expensive pair of Fandango cowboy boots I ever saw. And I thought, there's something wrong with this picture here. Well, it turned out Willie was the child of my brother Ernest and his floozy of a wife Felicity. And Willie had grown up in St. Louis, and he came west, he said, to help on the ranch. He said he wanted to be a cowboy. And I said, "Don't use that word here. Those are nothing but thugs and thieves, and those are bad people. We are not cowboys. We are ranchers. We do not cowboy. That's just thievery, and they're mean." So I tried my best with Willie. I really did. I tried to bring him into the household and raise him like one of mine. But pretty soon he had all the goodness he could take, and he took off. So the story, when it all hit everything, and the land was barren, and the well was dry, and everything went bad, I had written at the top of that page in my diary, a season of courage, because I had hit mine. When you need every last ounce of courage you've got, that's when it's just going to get tougher. And it did. But that fella in New York said they don't like that title. It sounds like you should have a Medal of Honor on the front. And I said, well, I'm a ranch woman in Arizona Territory. I should. But he said, no, we're going to call it Sarah's quilt because you are like the quilter that holds all these pieces of the family together. Well, time went on, the drought went on, and then the drought ended. And when the drought ended, we had some of those big old desert windstorms and rain. Whole town of Clifton washed off the side of the mountain. I mean, literally, there wasn't anything left standing but one poor old mule tied to a post. That's all there was of a whole town. And by then, Jack and I had moved into town, but we had moved back because it wasn't doing any good, but I still had that house in town. And you know, my daughter had gone married. My sons were just up to all kinds of trouble, but they weren't near as trouble as Willie. And we had a really good life. But finally, a time came when I thought, if there's ever a point in my life when I can try my hand at going to a real school, I'm going to do it. And I had a lot of fear, but a lot of encouragement, and I enrolled in that university. And all the kids there thought I was one of the teachers until I sat down next to them. Well, you know, I've been keeping house. I have sewed lace on dresses. I have sewed torn up cows. I've sewed cowboys with bullet holes in them. And they made me take home economics. And I had to sew a mob cap. I didn't even know what that was. One of them little lacy things that old ladies wear in the old days. And then I had to sew an apron. So I went home and I ripped some cloth in half and I stitched it up, and the next day I took back my apron, and you know, I failed aprons. I failed aprons. I failed out of that whole class. I couldn't do math the way they wanted it. Now I could tally cattle, and I could do percentage, and I could do all kinds of math you needed, but I couldn't do it in a class. Pretty soon I figured out there's a whole lot more to schooling than opening up the pages of a book. And so by the time I got done writing down all the things that happened to me on that journey, that fella in New York named it the Star Garden. And I have here a quilt called the Star Garden that I made, but it's kind of still all about my life. Only I kept on writing because life goes on. As long as you've got breath, you've got something to say. And I guarantee you, in a crowd this big, if there's anybody that wants to put down a memoir or tell something about it themselves, you don't have to get all upset or wonder where to start. You just start writing a letter. Write a letter to somebody that hasn't been born yet. Because my uncle could write, and my pa helped me learn to read and write. And I started out writing all those things, and the next thing you know, why, I decided I'd just put in things about my real life. You know, I was a crack shot. Jack and I used to just go out target shooting, and I could outshoot that cavalry officer. Well, there was a time when, but he was good. But there was a time when a rattlesnake crawled up on a rocking chair. And in the story, because I was so frightened, I wrote that I killed that rattlesnake right under my daughter April's hands. The true story, the one that really happened that was too scary for me to write about. See, if you're going to tell a story, it's okay to string that fish a little bigger. You can do that. But the real story was that my daughter came home one night to find a rattlesnake stretched across the front door. And she reached for the doorknob, and the thing lunged at her. Well, my Jack, being the man he was, the kind who would always run into a burning building, not out of one, grabbed his shotgun, held it waist high, and blew that snake's head off before I could even catch my breath and wonder what the screaming was about. So a lot of stuff that is in these stories really happened in my life. And as I went on writing, well, a thing happened. You know, my mom never really got her senses back when Pa died. But she carried on the best she could. It's just that it was a bit addled. And one day I was just out walking the range and doing things, and a rattlesnake sunk his big old front teeth into my boot. And my right foot has never been the same. So I thought, I don't want to put that in a story. It's too real. I'll write another story. I'll take my little niece, who is, oh my goodness, Mary Pearl Prine, what a pistol. That girl needed some manners. She needed some weapons. And she needed to learn about good and evil in a good way. I mean, she just she was the last of 9 children. And all she ever did was run after her little brothers and change diapers. So she didn't learn much except ranching and riding and how to shoot and throw a knife. I mean, that girl could pick it in a post from the back of a moving horse. She was nobody to fool with. But she didn't have a lot of finesse. She wasn't a lady like I always wanted to be. Well, anyway, I've decided in the story I'd have her have the one with the sore foot, and I'd let her go off to college too. And so that book has just come from New York, and it's called Light Changes Everything, because she went off there and studied photography, where they point lights at stuff and they make a big boom and your horses all jump and it's crazy. But you get pictures on glass and then you can put them on paper. So I have really enjoyed doing all this writing and talking to people all over the country and all over the world. But then a funny thing happened with that last story about Mary Pearl. My ma had a fit and wanted Mary Pearl to write down her memoirs. But in her memoirs, she remembered things that didn't happen to her. She remembered things from long, long ago when our family first came to this shore. Part of them was prisoners on a prison ship transported for the crime of being Quakers. Part of them were soldiers in the French army to fight the French and Indian War. But she remembered, and then that story turned into another book called My Name is Resolute, about a great-great-great-great-grandma named Resolute Talbot Eugenia. And I just love that big old juicy name. I wish I had some kind of fancy name besides Sarah Agnes. My grandkids even call me Aggie. It just kind of irks me. But I thank you all for all of your attention. I got some of that New York Feller's books for sale out there, but if you brought your own, I'll autograph them too. And I want to turn over now and let Janice sing all these pretty songs she's sung. Thank you so much. Do y'all want to ask any questions? That's what I need to do. Is there anybody with a question or comment? Yes, sir.
I walked in a little late, so just tell me when you live.
We pioneered in this ranch land from 1881 to about 1920. There are Prines buried in the Douglas Cemetery. It got real ornery around here during the last part of the 1910s. 1906, that drought ended, but the German army started pushing soldiers and armaments through here on trains and kidnapping people. And the next thing you know, this fellow we had actually met changed his name to Pancho Villa, and then all kinds of stuff broke loose. So we left shortly after that, and the family was getting really big and spread out. Anyone else? Yes.
I just want to make a comment. I've read 3 books. The first 3, East of my Montessori School, and I can't remember the third one.
The Star Garden, yes.
I recommend everybody read those.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This is actually the Star Garden quilt that's on the front of that book. The publisher let me do it, not because I was such an excellent quilter, but it was free cover art. It's all about business. But, you know, so is the cattle business. All right, Janice, take it away.
Well, Sarah, we're so glad you were able to travel through time and space and be with us here today at the Empire Ranch. And it's an honor to share these songs that were inspired by your story and give voice to your story and share the colors of your life, like the colors of that beautiful quilt. I am holding all the colors together. Draw them close, tuck them into my heart. Every stitch that I take, good decision or mistake, I'm piecing it together, dark and bright, in the quilt that holds the colors of my life. In the green glowing light that comes right before dawn, I shake off all my troubles, stretch and yawn. Uncover the aches, gently dust them away. They're gone with the coming of the day. Now the brown of the earth and her life-giving rain come wash away the dusty drought and pain. Feed the horses, the cattle, the family I love. Every blessing, good and plenty from above. I am holding all the colors together. Draw them close, tuck them into my heart. Every stitch that I take, good decision or mistake, I'm piecing it together, dark and bright, in the quilt that holds the colors of my life. The indigo of blue in the sky fits my mood, 'cause there will never be another you. You're close as my skin, but I see an empty space as tears slide down and soak my pillowcase. But the soft yellow glow of the lantern shines bright. It guides my children well, both day and night. For so long I've led them, but now I let go. I'll follow in their path and watch them grow. I am holding all the colors together. Draw them close, tuck them into my heart. Every stitch that I take, good decision or mistake, I'm piecing it together, dark and bright, in the quilt that holds the colors of my life. The red sunrise wakes up and welcomes the west. Done longing for the past, I'm looking forward to the rest. In the stark face of death, there's a greater need to live. Much more to do, I've still got more to give. I am holding all the colors together. Draw them close, tuck them into my heart. Every stitch that I take, good decision or mistake. I'm piecing it together, dark and bright, in the quilt that holds the colors, the kaleidoscope of colors, the quilt that holds the colors of my life. Yes, that song is called Sarah's Quilt, and it's off my album that's called Sarah's Quilt. I was first a fan and then became friends with the author, Sarah Agnes Prine. As you shared, Sarah, you were only 17 when you left your family home in Cottonwood Springs and joined that wagon train. You sure had to grow up fast, didn't you, Sarah?
That's right.
Standing all alone inside the storm, feeling sad and wistful, feeling my heart mourn. Now has come a time for moving on. Papa's feet are itching, I'm singing this sad song. There's our little house, it's facing south. Window there is open, gaping like a mouth, sounding like it's calling me back home. Time for moving forward, time for us to roam. The cottonwoods are calling me, playing pretty melodies. God whispers through the singing leaves, you're not so alone, you're not so alone, not so alone, not so alone, not so alone. Wagons moving forward, we make camp. Papa's shot and dead now, my heart's cold and damp. Mama's lost inside her own sad world. I'm forced to be a woman, I'm still just a girl. Brothers look to me for what to do. Ain't no fancy praying, Lord, I'm mad at you. Head of this here family on the trail. I know that I'm a sure shot, please don't let me fail. The cottonwoods are calling me, playing pretty melodies. God whispers through the singing leaves, you're not so alone, you're not so alone, not so alone, not so alone, not so alone. Now I'm on the hill I'm standing on, feeling sweet and wistful, holding my newborn. Never more a time for moving on. I never could have dreamed it. This ranch is now my home. The cottonwoods are calling me, playing pretty melodies. God whispers through the singing leaves, you're not so alone, you're not so alone, not so alone, not so alone, not so alone. And then you met Jack Elliott. That man.
That fella always made me feel like I had a bonnet on backwards, I'm telling you.
That man of mine, how he annoys me. He likes to aggravate and instigate. See the twinkle in his eye, that man of mine. How he'll surprise me with a kiss that knocks me off my feet. Didn't know that love could be so sweet. I'm looking twice at that man of mine. I'm used to fending for myself. I don't need nobody's help, but I'm ready for a change. It gets kinda lonesome on the range. That man of mine, how he protects me. He's always helping, watching out for me, and holds me tenderly. That man of mine, oh how he heals me when I'm haunted by the memories from the pages of my life. I'm so glad that I am now his wife. What would I do without that man of mine? What would I do without that man of mine? What would I do without that man of mine? Sarah, you talked a little about your nephew, Willie.
Yes.
That rascal. That you took him into your heart and took him into your home. And I can almost hear him singing this song as I read that letter again. I read it just the other day, the letter that he wrote to you. I can almost hear him singing this song. He did a lot of things wrong, but he really loved you, Sarah.
Well, I love that boy too.
Yeah, I could almost hear him singing this. I'm a young cowboy, and I know I've done wrong. As I walked out in the streets of Laredo, as I walked out in Laredo one day, I spied a young cowboy all wrapped in white linen, all wrapped in white linen, as cold as the clay. I see by your outfit that you are a cowboy. these words he did say, as I boldly walked by. Come sit down beside me and hear my sad story. Got shot in the breast, and I know I must die. So beat the drum slowly and play the five lowly. Sing the death march as you carry me along. Take me to the valley, then lay the sod o'er me. I'm a young cowboy, and I know I've done wrong. Go fetch me some water, a cool cup of water to cool my parched lips, the poor cowboy said. Before I returned, his spirit had left him. His spirit had left him. The cowboy was dead. So beat the drum slowly and play the five lowly. Sing the death march as you carry me along. Take me to the valley, then lay the sod o'er me. I'm a young cowboy, and I know I've done wrong. I've done wrong. You sacrificed so much for so many years, and finally that dream was realized to go to college. And that was where country met city, and middle-aged woman met those teenage students. And like you said, you really learned quick that learning's more than what's between the pages of a book. Well, I don't fit in, I'm different somehow. The way I walk and talk and dress, I'm making a scene, making a scene. They're all laughing at me everywhere I go. On the campus of this fine university, all the students here, wet behind the ears, have opinions about some things they never have seen, never have seen. Well, this here woman has seen, she's seen a thing or two. These who make you laugh and cry and make your heart bleed. But I've longed for this long before I could read. This drive to learn's been pulling at me since I found those books left along the trail. These lessons I've learned, no book can tell. Learning's more than what's between the pages. Learning's more no matter what your age is. Understanding comes in different ways, that learning's more than what's between the pages. While I failed some things that I thought I knew, I made an apron and the teacher said it wasn't right. Wasn't right. Now I've done many things over many years. I've done all of them my way and I've made a good life. In the end I've learned that I haven't missed out. I've grown from a life well lived. All of these years, I've been working the land and raising my kids. I've learned how to love again by facing my fears. But I've longed for this long before I could read. This drive to learn's been pulling at me since I found those books left along the trail. These lessons I've learned, no book can tell. Learning's more than what's between the pages. Learning's more no matter what your age is. Understanding comes in different ways, and learning's more than what's between the pages. More, so much more than what's between the pages. More, so much more, so much more. So much more. Well, you talked a little about Mary Pearl Prine. And many times you said that she was more like you than your own daughter.
She was, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Girl after your own heart. And there was this cowhand that used to like to sing to her on the front porch. Brody, right?
Brody was his name.
Mm-hmm.
Short for Merle. Don't know how that happened.
Way before Merle Haggard. You've never heard of him, have you? Have you, Sarah?
No.
From this valley, they say you are going. We will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine that is brighten our pathways a while. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember the Red River Valley and the one who has loved you so true. I've been thinking a long time, my darling, of the sweet words you never would say. That when last must my fond hopes are vanish, for they say you are going away. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu. Just remember our Red River Valley and the one who has loved you so true. Well, Sarah Agnes Prine, you sure have had a colorful life, just like that quilt you were stitching here today. I am holding all the colors together. Draw them close, tuck them into my heart. Every stitch that I take, good decision or mistake, I'm piecing it together, dark and bright. In the quilt that holds the colors, the kaleidoscope of colors, the quilt that holds the colors of my life.
Janice has CDs out there.
And Sarah Agnes Prine / Nancy E. Turner has books out there. So we hope to see you over at the author's tent. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you all for coming. I'll turn back into Nancy now.